live. All right. Guys, we have with us today mayoral. How do you say
mayoral
that?
Candidate.
Mayoral candidate Scott Willis of Westfield. So, welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate
Thanks for
the
coming
invite.
on. Yeah, definitely. Glad you made it out. So, who is Scott Willis? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, boy, that's a loaded question. I'm a husband, father, Marine, entrepreneur. The list goes on and on. So I was born and raised here in central Indiana.
What town?
Kokomo.
There we go.
Yeah, I grew up just outside the city limits. Went to a little tiny county school called Taylor High School.
Taylor, okay.
So consider myself more of a small town kid growing up.
Yeah.
Graduated from high school, went to Purdue, studied engineering.
Okay.
And halfway through my junior year at Purdue, there was this thing called Desert Storm that happened. And who am I? That little thing that didn't last real long, right. But I come from a legacy of Marines in my family, really dating all the way to my great-grandfather.
That's awesome.
I've had service family members who have died in service to this country, and so I felt the immediate call to serve. And so I went down, signed up for the Marine Corps. Before I got back to my room, the war was over. I joke at least, but graduated, went into the Marines, and did my 4 years of active duty. Ended up getting out, got back into the reserves.
Okay.
So I've served my whole life up until April of this last year. I retired, but I have pretty much served my entire adult life for this country.
How many years did you
30
serve?
years.
30 years.
30
of
years.
service. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. When I came off active duty, I actually started up a couple of small businesses. So I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Love dabbling in business. So that really occupied a big chunk of my time over the last 15, 20 years. But as I mentioned, I'm married. I've got 3 amazing kids. And we've been serving this community. I'm currently on city council running for mayor, but it goes deeper than that. I've been on many boards of directors for non-for-profits. I'm on a couple of national level board of directors for veterans groups. So I've been serving really my whole life. That's what I do.
That's awesome. That's a big part of who you are then.
It really is. It is who I am.
Sounds like it's a big part of your family's legacy too.
It is. It is. And it's permeating through my kids now. My middle daughter just graduated her senior from NCL, National Charity League. Okay. And gave hundreds of hours of service to Westfield through that organization. My wife, it's actually a mother-daughter organization, so my wife was with her, hand in hand going through that. My oldest daughter right now is at Xavier. She wants to be a doctor, but she's doing a lot of community service hours for Open Doors and a few other charities as well. So it's awesome. Just been kind of the fabric of who we are as a family.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, we've gotten a chance to spend some time with Graydon too, get to coach him.
That's
a little
right.
bit. And that's been really cool. Of course, he's a little bit younger, hasn't quite gotten to those college years yet.
But I drag him out every once in a while to go to things with Dad.
Good.
But he's not a willing participant at this age.
Understandably so. He'd rather be off with the friends. And
That's
whatnot,
right. That's right.
That's funny. So what are these businesses that you came back and ended up starting? Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, so when I came off active duty, I actually went into work in manufacturing. So I started with a company called Corning Incorporated, a Fortune 500 company at the time. Mm-hmm. Their portfolio of products were really centered around glass manufacturing. So at the plant I worked at, we did television glass for the old TV tubes. And as that industry died with flat screens,
these don't have the same
knock
they're not
anymore. Glass, you don't have to carry that 500-pound TV from one house to the next. But as that industry started to die and technology changed, I wanted to come back to Indiana, where I was from. I had an opportunity to go to work for General Motors, so I worked for GM for just a couple of years. Okay. Ran their maintenance and engineering group there. At their Guide Court plant, we made taillights for trucks and cars, for GM cars.
Got one sitting out front.
There you go. There you go. And the writing was on the wall. That was at the time where GM started spinning off all their Tier 2 and 3 suppliers. And you could see the writing on the wall that this company was going to struggle outside the protection of a General Motors. So within just a couple of years, they started moving towards bankruptcy. So I ended up reaching out to the executive search firm that placed me at GM and said, hey, you guys got to help me get out of here. This place it's dying. And one thing led to the next. I went to work for him. I never really saw myself doing that. I mean, I'm an engineer.
Right.
Never saw myself in sales or business development or anything like that, but really found my calling when I went to work for them.
That's cool.
I just absolutely loved, one, I loved sales, but two, I loved helping people. Not only did I help companies build their organizations, but I helped people in transition looking for jobs, and really just found it a rewarding profession. So I was with them for about 5 years. I had a 1-year non-compete, which is pretty standard in that industry.
Sure.
I got back into the reserves where I got mobilized to go to Iraq, and I had 1-year orders, and I had a 1-year non-compete. So I resigned from the company, went off, served my country in war, came back and started my own company. And
So you were deployed in the reserves then?
I was mobilized, ended up being mobilized for a little over a year.
Okay.
And so I was, at the time, I was a commanding officer for the Marine Detachment at Peru, or Grissom Reserve Base. But we got mobilized, went to Camp Lejeune, and integrated in with 2nd Marine Division. And from there, we went in country into Iraq. And my Marines were kind of spread out all over the battlefield. In fact, very few of the Marines I went with actually were with me in Iraq. I ended up taking over it's about 1,200 Marines. It was a combat detachment on the Syrian border, and I ran from there, where most of my Marines were spread out into different units throughout the battle space. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
But when I came back, I started up my own executive search firm and grew it over time. My second company I started up was actually an offshoot of that. I've never been a fan of renting, so I bought my first office. It was a little tiny 600 square foot office, and
cool.
Ended up paying cash for it. Scrounged out some money and got it on a steal and bought it. And as we started to grow and that space became too small, I was like, well, we need to get a new space. So I bought another office and decided, hey, I own this free and clear. Why not just rent it out? And next thing you know, I decided, hey, I kind of like the way this is working, and I ended up starting buying commercial properties, and now I have 8 or 9 properties here in Hamilton County.
Oh, awesome.
That I bought my first multifamily space in Sheridan. So we're playing around with it, but it's something I'm very passionate about, and I've enjoyed kind of that side business. Now, my executive search firm, I actually just sold it about 2 years ago.
Okay.
I have an earn-out where I have to stay with them until the end of this year.
Gotcha.
So, which is pretty standard when you're talking a company where intellectual property is a big part of what you're selling. We don't have inventory. We don't have assets. It's all intellectual property. So.
Right. So who did you guys end up selling your executive search firm?
Yeah, I sold to Theris, which is a global professional services company based out of actually Keystone at the Crossing in Indianapolis.
Okay. I know I've seen their sign up, so I didn't really know what they did.
So
Awesome.
they're a multi-divisional company, and one of their divisions, Matrix, who they have since sold, was a global company that dealt in FDA remediation. So if you manufacture drugs, biologics, medical device products, and you get in trouble with the FDA, they would come in with an army of consultants that would help solve their problems. And they like that executive search piece to it, because oftentimes when you get in trouble with the FDA, people are getting fired. So they wanted that component, being able to bring in an executive search arm as well to help them find new talent to help them move forward from that crisis. So I joined them in 2019, I think it was, and so that's or maybe it was 2020. I don't know, one of those dates. But anyways, I've been with them ever since, and my time with them will end at the end of this year.
That's awesome, and hopefully lead into being the mayor of Westfield. Right?
That's right. That's right. Timing is such; stars have aligned, and hopefully. December 31st will be my last day with them, and January 1 I take over as mayor of Westfield. So
that's awesome.
Time will tell.
So how do you feel that your time in the Marines and time being deployed as well, because not everybody gets that experience, right?
That's right.
How do you feel like that's shaped you as a man, as a father, husband, businessman, and then has led to forming you for being a great candidate for mayor?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a loaded question, too.
I asked a lot of those.
Well, I will say this. When you've been in combat, you look at life through a different lens on the back end of that.
I can believe that.
You never take things for granted. And I reflect back on my time in Iraq, and I'm appreciative of the experience. It was amazing serving my country, and that was something I had been training for at that time for 12, 15 years of my career. But when you see what you see over there and you experience even what the Iraqis, were experiencing in their country, for 2,000 years, for the most part, it's been a country where it's not been a democracy. They've been led by a regime of some sort. It's very tribal in nature. They don't get along, and you got dirt roads and their sanitation and other basic services that we're accustomed to are wheeled outside the city and dumped in the sand. So it's you really get appreciation for how blessed you are, and you certainly get a better perspective of how lucky you are to be alive and live in America. But it also has shaped me just in terms of being a father and a husband, because when you're there, you're wired for the experience, and you're also wired for the fact you may not come home. So the preparation with your family of the fact that you may not return. When you do come home, you look at your family in a different light, and you're certainly more appreciative of the time that you have and the relationships that you have with your family. My family, we're very tight-knit. It's the center of my universe, and we've always been very tight. And we're maybe not that family that goes on vacation with 5 other families. We like that time together because it's precious, and we know it's never a guarantee.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's real. Did you see a lot of loss over there?
We didn't. Yes, some of it was closer than others.
Okay.
We were there when we first got there. It was pretty rough. We were there during the lead up to the constitutional referendum and the national election. So Al-Qaeda was doing everything they could to stop democracy from happening. So we got there in August, late August, early September, and all the way through December, it was pretty heavy combat operations. And we were going door to door, clearing out cities, and then setting up safe havens where we could run patrols and keep the peace so that the elections could occur. Amazingly, after the national elections were over, it got real quiet.
Really?
Because Al-Qaeda had realized that
they lost.
So it went from combat operations more to civil affairs.
Okay.
And at that point, we're rebuilding roads. We're helping them rebuild their schools and put infrastructure and run water to the communities. And, stuff that, looking back, was really, it was a really neat time to be there.
Yeah.
Once you got past the combat piece and really started to see the fruits of your labor and see democracy really taking hold in that country.
That's really cool. How does that change your view of, or maybe puts in perspective the problems we see as a community or just in day-to-day life?
Yeah. And life has gotten so vitriol, hasn't it? I mean, from the national level all the way down to the local level, and especially in politics. I mean, there's so much hatred and people are so divided, and when you've experienced that, you realize that, man, again, we're really blessed here. Our problems are small. I don't want to say that everybody fits into that category. We certainly have our own challenges here in Westfield, but for the most part, we're in a pretty affluent community. It's a great place to live. We're routinely ranked as one of the best places to live in America. And we're fighting over things that are really insignificant compared to what people overseas and even other places in our country are dealing with.
Yeah, that. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about how there's more people on antidepressants and SSRIs in a suburban community than there are other places in the world. And I'm not going to quote the statistics; I cannot remember what it was, but it just seems very problematic that we've allowed our society and our communities to become too soft, and we've made everything too convenient to the point where we're not serving a purpose anymore. That purpose is to provide, it's to feed, it's to nurture, it's to educate. And when you give that responsibility off because you can pay somebody for it, of course you're going to get depressed.
Well, and it's amazing too. So you're in combat for a year. Well, we weren't there quite for a year. About 9 months of the year, there was a workup and a period where we were basically returning home. But for those 9 months, we didn't have cell phones. We certainly didn't have access to Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. And what a blessing that was. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When I look at kids today and some of the struggles they have with mental health, that's stuff they don't deal with in Iraq. People don't get on social media and worry about what their friends are doing or.
When you're worried about survival, you're not worried.
You don't
about
worry about that.
Exactly.
You got bigger problems in the world. You really do. And
Yeah.
I think about what our kids deal with now. When I was growing up, if my buddies were hanging out and I wasn't invited, I would never have known.
Right.
Unless they're going to come back to school and talk about it. But now, because of social media, you know right away.
Yeah.
And I think that has a big part of why kids are struggling so much now is that information overload and what they have access to and where they spend their time, quite frankly, in front of that cell phone or computer monitor. And unfortunately, people, we call them keyboard warriors. They sit behind a keyboard and they're just angry.
You have a lot bigger balls when you're behind a screen.
Yeah. You're a real brave dude there, sitting behind that computer and chucking insults at people.
Yeah.
But yeah, it certainly has changed, and I'm glad I didn't grow up now that my kids are. I don't know how I would have dealt with that.
Do you think there's a way around that in a community? Because, in order to have a very, affluent, safe, well-respected area for people to want to come live, it does need to be safe, and the convenience does need to be there. So how do you think, if it's even possible, do we change our society so that there are things that we either have to do that we can't just pay somebody for, or do you think that's just a choice you have to make as a way to shape your life, or do you think there's a way we can help push people that way, in a way?
Well, I can tell you in our community, I think a big reason why social media is so prevalent in our kids' day-to-day activities is because you got a lot of professionals in here who are busy and they're working hard and trying to get to whatever their goals are in life, and it's an easy out to give your kid a cell phone and allow them to do what they do, unsupervised oftentimes. And I can say in my household, we've been guilty of it as well from time to time. It's kind of a lazy fallback for parents. The other side is, we live in a society today where people are scared.
Yeah.
We're scared all the time now of our kids' safety, what's happening, when we're not around. And that cell phone is a link to tracking where they're at and what they're doing. And
there's a lot of good that comes with it.
There is, and it's hard to give it up. Like, for example, my son's diabetic, and I get on my phone at any time, and I can tell you exactly where his sugars are. And when you're a diabetic parent, you're always worried about it going too low or too high and the physical ramifications of that. So we've given him a phone. He's had a phone since he was probably 7 years old. And I'll be the first one to admit that, do I check it enough to see where he's going, and do I monitor his time when he's at home and what he's doing with it? No, because it's like a medical device for us. And we forget the other piece to that, hey, he has access to things that maybe 13, 14-year-old kids shouldn't have access to. Yeah. And so I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but certainly it's been a crutch, I think, in our society. Yeah.
Well, and I think, as you said, there's a lot of good that comes with it, but there's a lot of, this is a great comparison that I've heard. Is it essentially gives you the eye of God, and we're not designed for that. We're not designed to see what's going on all over the world at all points of the day.
That's right.
And that's part of what leads to anxiety. It leads to fears. It leads to lust. After what other people have.
That's right.
When you see somebody living their best life on social media, well, let's be real. We know that that's not every day, all day.
Yeah.
But that's what you see. Of course, you're like, man, my life sucks. I live in the middle of a bunch of cornfields.
That's right.
I want to be them sitting on a beach in Bali. And we're not meant to see what everybody's doing at all times of the day. And I think that's a negative side effect of it. With anything good comes bad too, right? We live in a fallen world,
and how many people post on Facebook when they're having a fight, or when they're sad, or when they're doing something they don't want to do? It's always good stuff, right? So you build this aura of being perfect or having a perfect life, and when it's just not real.
Yeah, well, it just takes keeping up with the Jones to a whole other level.
That's right. This week's been a topic conversation in my household. Well, we didn't go anywhere for spring break. We're probably the only one in my neighborhood that didn't. I'm campaigning. I'm knocking on doors and doing things you have to do in an election, and my son's frustrated because he sees his buddies on social media in Florida or Punta Cana or wherever else they go, and we're in Westfield, Indiana, and and doing what we do. So it's I get it, but it certainly has a toxic effect to it.
Definitely. And I would encourage everybody out there to, even if you're not going on vacation, you can't afford it, you got things going on with business, whatever, like, to go for a day trip. Like we took our kids to, like, we're in the process of, all sorts of business right now, right? Like we can't step away. And we ended up taking our kids for a 2-night stay. We went to an Airbnb in Missouri of all places, right? Like the meth capital of the world.
Oh, yeah.
I swear,
Can't
every
wait.
building we went into, the restaurants, the Bass Pro Shop, everybody had a needle dispenser. It was insane.
gosh.
I mean, but I guess people are doing it. It's better that than a trash can, right? But it was a cool experience because we saw a part of the country we've never seen. We saw a part of the country that we would probably never go to. But we were like, you know what? Let's find something to do. And we went to a safari zoo. It's one of the largest ones in the country, 350 acres in the Ozarks. And so this landscape is absolutely stunning. And we drove through and we got to feed bison. We got to feed zebras. They come right up. I had a longhorn literally stick his head in my truck. And his horns were the only thing stopping him from going any further.
Wow.
And he was very conscious with those horns. He knew I had a nice truck, so he didn't bang it up. But it was such a cool trip, and we stayed in a tree house, which was really cool. Now that tree house may or may not have almost burned down, so that part was fun. We had to call the fire department and go to a hotel that night. But it was just a cool adventure, And it was only a 2-night trip, wasn't very expensive, and all the kids' friends, because they go to a Catholic school, and so all their friends are in Florida. They're going fun places that are not here, and here's little old us going to Missouri. But we had such a great time with the family, and it was just such a cool time to be together. We drove on Route 66, and we taught the kids about what Route 66 is. I mean, it was just a cool experience, And so, like, I encourage people, even if you're not going to Florida, who cares? Go on some sort of adventure.
That's right. That's right. Just spend time with your family.
Exactly.
That's where memories are made.
Exactly.
No matter how corny it may seem, that's what kids love. They want that time with their parents.
Yeah, and sometimes the places you would never think would be a cool spot to go are the coolest. They're the best adventures, last summer we went up to Michigan, just a little 3-night camping trip, and it was so cool. I was proud of my son for doing man things in the woods. Hopefully he doesn't hear this when he gets older, because that'll definitely embarrass him. But we went up there, we hiked the dunes, and cheap trip, easy, But it was just so cool to be with the family, and sometimes being in nature like that, with no distractions around, is the best detox you can get. So. And
then unplug.
Yeah.
Take the phones away and unplug.
Phones away. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. So, Scott, in your mind, what does serving the community look like?
Man, that's a deep question. Serving the community. Well, it can mean a lot of things, but mostly for me, it's about helping others. Mm-hmm. It's about giving back to others in the community who are in need of something. And we've done it in a lot of ways in our family. From, I'm personally in the Rotary Club, which is a service organization. Okay. Of course, my wife and daughter were in the National Cheerleading League. So whether it be projects through that we participate as a family, through our church, to just helping a friend out, in your neighborhood. Yeah. Like for example, this past wintertime, we got some snow. I finally got a snow blower, but only because my son had begged for it and he promised he would do good things with it. So I bought it.
Did he? Is the question?
He did.
Okay, good.
So
good.
Every time we got snow, he's going down the sidewalks and into the neighbors' yards and helping them out.
Awesome.
And not expecting any money for that. So I mean, service can take on a lot of forms, but it's giving back and helping people in need.
That's cool. That's cool. Why are you running for mayor?
Yeah, that's a great question. My wife asks me that every day when I wake up. Why? But it's not so nice. Why are you doing this? It's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. For the last 3 or 4 months, it's been a daily grind of all the different things you have to do to win a race. But, I've served my whole life. I've served my country and my community my entire life. Mm-hmm. And as I was nearing retirement from the Marine Corps, I started thinking about what's next in my life. Yeah. I've had some success on the business side, and that certainly has been fulfilling. Mm-hmm. But I was starting to feel this void of, hey, there's something else here that I can do and give back to my community. Yeah. I'd been on city council I'm in my third year, first term on city council. So I thought about serving through politics. And, mayor just kind of came to me as a natural next step. I've managed in the military, I've managed large groups, large assets, large budgets. I ran small businesses, so I have a bit of a business acumen that comes with that. And,
Sure.
and I just felt like those skill sets really lined up well to being a mayor, one, but two, I look at the landscape of Westfield, and although I certainly don't want to criticize our current mayor, 16 years taking it from a small town to a rapidly growing city, that there's a lot of challenges, and it's easy to Monday morning quarterback that.
Yeah.
But I saw some gaps. I saw some things that needed to be adjusted on that I felt my strengths lined up well for, and so that's what really got me motivated to put myself out there and run.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's been for you maybe the most controversial topic for you, like as you've been running and leading up to this point to run for mayor?
I don't know if there's been a controversial topic, but certainly something that's been very energized. I get asked everywhere I go is, what's your vision for the city moving forward? As you know from living here or working here in Westfield, we've seen growth, and I don't think everybody agrees with how we have grown. We have pockets in our city where nothing's really happening, like the downtown area. We have pockets where a lot of things are happening,
Booming.
like State Road 32, and people don't like how that's developing. So every door I knock on, if I get somebody live and they want to talk, they always ask, what is the city going to look like 10, 20 years from now?
That's a good question.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm different from my opponents is I have a very clear vision of what that looks like. And I think you have to. If you don't, we're going to end up looking back on this 20 years from now and saying, wow, we had the opportunity to really build something special, and it kind of got away from us.
Well, at a certain point, I feel like you can't go backwards, right?
You can't.
Like
That's
if you build the wrong way, then you're going to look back and go, oh crap, well, we can't move these neighborhoods now.
That's
or
right.
We can't move these buildings now. Now we're kind of stuck with what we've done. So that's got to be a real stressor for
it is. And if
mayor.
and if you look at some of our sister cities here in central Indiana, what would be Zionsville or Fishers, where they got too far down the path before they really started to think about the future. You could build in infrastructure problems into your city that, if you do solve it, it's going to cost taxpayers millions and millions of dollars to fix.
Yeah.
So you got to get it right, and that's been something I've been thinking a lot about, really for the past several years as I've contemplated running.
Yeah. So that next 10 years, it sounds like you have a very clear idea of what that looks like, and what I think is cool is, always be planning, never have a set plan, right?
That's right.
But have a vision.
That's right.
And that's what I've tried to do in business, and so far it's worked. I feel like sometimes it's kind of just free balling and seeing what happens, but
throw it up against the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Happens.
But what is that vision for you? If you are elected mayor, what is that vision in the first year and then 10 years from now?
I think the first year we've got to have a roadmap. We've got to rebuild that roadmap of what Westfield will look like. I certainly have a vision, but it's just not my city. I'm just the caretaker of the city. It's our 50,000 resident city. So I think the first thing you have to do is bring that vision to the community and let them chew on it. Let them weigh in and make some recommendations themselves on what they would like to see. And then from that feedback, you create that roadmap. Okay. And once that roadmap is created, then you can start going to the development community, to businesses out there that are interested in coming to Westfield, and you can show them that map and say, hey, you want to be here, we want to have you, but here's what we need, where we want it, and what it looks like, and here's what's an option for you.
Yeah.
And when you think about Carmel, I never wanted to live in Carmel. I came to Westfield for a reason, but it doesn't mean I can't look back at Carmel and say, wow.
They've done some things well.
They've done amazing things, in particular around having a vision and building to it. If you ever sat down with Jim Brainerd and asked him, hey, what do you want here? What do you want there? He could tell you what would be on top of every blade of grass in that city. I mean, he had a vision. And, whether you like how he executed it or not, certainly there's critiques around or criticism around debt and other things. he built out a city that is really something unique and special, especially when you consider it's in the middle of flatland Indiana. But here in Westfield, we don't have that.
Yeah.
You know, if you talk to the mayor or anybody on city council and ask them, show me the plan for downtown, there is none. And that's kind of been the problem. You plop something neat in one corner, but then that kind of controls the destiny potentially for the rest of the block.
Yeah, well, Rivet Coffee is a great example.
Rivet Coffee's, I love Rivet Coffee.
Or no, but no parking.
That's right, no parking, and now you've got a block that's got a lot of empty lots that are kind of, you've just taken out a corner, a very important piece of that block in development.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you wanted all along, but I would argue it's not. I mean, I love Rivet, and I'd love to see it stay there and thrive, but I doubt that was ever the vision day one for what we wanted on that block.
Yeah,
so,
well, it was originally a residential home, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, there you go. It's hard to redesign residential areas as a commercial area.
That's right. So that's something that I feel like year one we've got to develop the map, and then year 2 through 4 we start moving forward and executing on that map, because like I said, we've got real challenges in our city as you think about 10, 20 years down the road, keeping up with the growth and the infrastructure and all the things that come with running a city. That's going to be incredibly challenging if we don't change the direction of some of the things that we're doing in our city.
Yeah, well, and now Westfield has a team that has beat Carmel, right? So a football team that's beat Carmel.
Yes.
So more people are going to want to be coming here,
Football, basketball. I mean, Westfield is becoming
big.
a destination for all of our sports teams. And, even my son plays lacrosse. For years, Carmel dominated lacrosse. And now, I can tell you in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade levels, we're beating them, and beating them pretty solidly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You're seeing that change across the board.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, other than the development, well, actually, let me ask you one more question here. On the residential side of development, what's the plan there? Because I know they're set for many more neighborhoods to be built, and I think what a lot of people are getting, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think what a lot of people are getting tired of seeing is houses so close together. It's like you fly over this place and it looks like a cornfield of homes now, not cornfields. I guess is there any plan there to kind of spread things out a little bit more?
Well, yes and no. Right now, the plan, we have a comprehensive plan, and it was developed in 2008 by a lot of residents in the community. But the comprehensive plan was never a map. It was just kind of, hey, in this general area of the city, we want higher density homes. And as you go further west or further north, we want that density to reduce. And in this pocket, we want commercial. But it doesn't define what commercial is. It doesn't define what density is. I mean, does my backyard count as density or just the building and concrete?
Right.
There's a lot of things about that. And I've been told it was on a purpose, was to keep it very vague. But I would argue that vagueness has created a lot of the issues that we have.
Interesting.
So, moving forward, yes, we have a lot more areas identified in the original comprehensive plan that calls for residential growth.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm mayor of Westfield, we're going to revisit that. And there are areas that I think are residential right now that I'd rather us not develop it that way. We need more opportunities for good commercial development in our city. We have to diversify our tax base if we're going to stay solvent long term. So there's some things I want to change in that. But when you talk about density, it depends on what demographic or what age group you talk to and how that resonates. For you and I with kids, we don't want density. I don't want my neighbors on top of me.
Right.
But you talk to our kids and you talk to kids coming out of college, they don't want yards.
Yeah.
They don't want to keep up with the yards. They like that zero lot line, high density, or being in a downtown area where it's walkable.
Right.
And it's only walkable if there's density. You start sprawling and you need cars. So I think it's important as we look at the future of Westfield that we're not just building a Westfield for my generation or your generation or retirees' generations. 30 years, a lot of us are going to be gone. We're not even going to be on this earth. We need Westfield to be a vibrant city for decades to come. And that means these young folks coming out of college or kids that are in the high school right now, what do they want?
Right.
And what do we need? We need to be willing to create that in our community if you want them to come back and raise their families in your hometown.
Yeah.
And that's not happening right now in Westfield. There's no place to work. And most people, you get lucky, they go to Carmel.
Yeah.
And, they're close, but they're not in Westfield. because Carmel has done a great job of building something that young generations want to be a part of.
Well, but even that Midtown area, it's not the same as what Fishers is, right?
Yeah,
like
very
downtown
different.
Fishers is definitely a more popping, vibrant, youthful community. Midtown Carmel is getting there. Especially now that there's more jobs downtown and that Midtown, those apartment developments and all that, that has definitely helped that, and probably over the next few years it'll just continue to grow. But yeah, as you said, Westfield doesn't have anything like that. And as a business owner myself, looking at that, it's like, yeah, I mean, I would love to see more, people of all age groups coming into our gym, and like right now, I think our youngest member is 24, 25. Other than some of the kids of the members, but as developing that membership base and all that, it's like, yeah, we want to see some 20-year-olds coming in out of college, I don't. Is that even possible for Westfield? Do you think
it is? It absolutely is possible, but we just got to think differently because, like right now, if you brought a high-density development to our city council, we're going to say no.
Yeah.
Because we have said flat out, or people within the council said, if it's not at least an acre lot in size, we're not interested. Well, if it's an acre in Hamilton County, it's going to be $250,000. So you just priced out a big chunk of society. And then again, younger folks aren't buying 1 acre lots. So I love those 1 acre lots. I've lived in those myself, but again, you need to have a little bit of everything. You need variety. I do believe, though, that most people in Westfield are tired of seeing the same cookie cutter neighborhood. And we were not great when we were first growing. We accepted a lot of the same thing. Still at a much higher price point than any other. The city I grew up in, $300,000 home would be at the very high end of the food chain. In Westfield, that's at the bottom.
Yeah.
So we have to keep it in perspective. But I would argue that it has been a lot of the same types of stuff.
I bought our first home here in Westfield, and I think we paid $206 for that thing. And I think that same home now is just shy of $300 if it's not over.
Oh, I bet.
It just blew me away when I looked at that last. And I mean, yeah, that does price out a lot of younger people.
And it's starting to price out older people too.
Oh, sure.
Because not only can they not afford to come here, but the taxes keep going up. Our assessed values in Westfield went up 23% this year. When you open up your tax bill here in Westfield, that's a painful experience. That's a good problem to have. Nobody wants to live in a community with declining home values, but it is a challenge, especially when the price point to get in is already really high.
Yeah. Man, that's there's a lot more planning to that than
it's very
expect.
complex, and it's very, it's not that simple, and that's why I've been saying on the campaign trail for months, experience really matters. You don't want to hand the keys over of this city with the challenges we have right now to somebody that hasn't developed a toolkit that can hit the ground running day one. One other thing we lack right now in Westfield, all we have is residential homes. 90% of our tax base comes from residential homes and apartments. We don't have a commercial tax base here. So when you think about
that's why the residents' taxes are going up.
It's part of it. A lot of it's the assessed value, but supply and demand certainly plays into that. But really it's more about, as you grow and as you sprawl as a city, every new residential development requires roads out to it, puts more people on your streets, beats up your roads more. What about the schools? It's more kids in the school district. Right. They have to adjust for the growth. So there's a lot of expenses that are happening because of our rapid growth here in the city, but we don't have a commercial tax base to offset that burden on the taxpayer. We as residents are footing that entire bill. And you look at Carmel, for example, they're 55% commercial or residential, 45 commercial.
Really?
And we're 90-10.
Well, and I think Carmel, at least the last time I looked, was one of the lowest tax-paying cities in the state.
It is. It absolutely is.
It's very incredible considering all the development there, all the roundabouts there, the art that goes on top of those, The
yard art?
Yeah, the yard art. Oh, my gosh. My wife's favorite one. We have it 126th and Gray. And I never noticed this. This is what I love about my wife. She notices all these little things. She stops and smells the roses. But there's a roundabout there that has a rock, sheet of paper, and scissors on top. Rock, paper, scissors.
I don't know if I've ever noticed that.
I don't
even pay attention. It's so bad. For everything that Carmel has done right, That has to be the worst thing they've ever done. And they've spent millions of dollars on that yard art.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's
Yeah.
what you see on a country road as you're driving out in the middle of nowhere. Somebody with that art in their yard.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Crazy.
Yeah. But rock, paper, scissors, I was like, okay, whoever thought of that one was good. But yeah, like, but they've done a good job of not putting that burden on the residents.
That's right.
Right? Like,
That's right.
It's gone to the commercial base.
And Carmel, they've done all these abatements to attract a lot of these businesses, which you have to do.
Explain what an abatement is exactly.
Well, an abatement is where you give them a tax break, and you can abate a lot of things. Here in Westfield, we abate property taxes. So if let's say you have a business here and you're paying $1 million in taxes every year, and you're going to invest in a new project that's going to increase your taxes to $3 million, we would abate that gap or that delta.
Okay.
But there's a lot of you can abate for capital investments. You can abate for salaries if it's a high enough paying type of job that you're bringing to the community. You can abate that. It's just a tax incentive for these businesses to come, and you got to do it. Cool. I mean, everybody complains about it, but we're in a global economy now. I mean, if they're looking at Westfield, they're looking all over the world. And I know here in Westfield, we think we're special, and we are. It's a great place to live. Yeah. But there's a lot of great places to live, and businesses at the end of the day are looking through a different lens than what we are as residents. So if you want them, you've got to do abatements. Now, Carmel's done a ton of abatements, much more aggressive than we have in Westfield, but a lot of those abatements are getting ready to roll off. And Carmel's already pretty flush with cash.
Yeah.
There's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain, and they're getting ready to reap the benefits of that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Now, my complaint with Carmel is they have just ran up debt. I mean, $125 million bonds for roundabouts. Right. I mean, that stuff. In my opinion, that's irresponsible.
Maybe I'm small-minded, but I don't really like to play with debt. I mean, unless on real estate, maybe, but other than that, yeah.
Well, but not all debt's created equal either.
Right,
I mean, we just came out of a period where money was basically free. Interest rates were so low, it was smart to take on debt. You'd rather be cash heavy, and take on a little bit of debt because of the interest rates. Now that's starting to change. Yeah. But the other piece to it too is some debt helps move the ball forward, and actually returns an investment to the city that other debt doesn't. So I'm all about doing public-private partnerships and other things where we're helping bring in a revenue source to our community where we might invest $1 into that project. We're going to get $3 back in return in tax revenue. Those are things that are strategic that you have to do.
Yeah.
But $10 million for yard art or $125 million for roundabouts. I mean, everybody loves roundabouts. I do too.
Yeah,
we're going to build them all.
Mm-hmm.
But does it have to be done overnight? And is that a good use of debt for a city? It's worked for Carmel. I mean, we can sit here and throw darts at them, but
they've done it. They have done a really good job with Carmel. I mean, that's where our residence is right now. We've lived in Indianapolis, then Westfield. Now we're in Carmel. Now we want to move back to Westfield. So
we'd love to have you
one day.
Scott finds you a house.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the hard part.
Right now.
And our interest rate's so stupid low on our house. It's like, man, I wonder if I can keep it as a rental. Yeah, that's what I got to figure out, But no, eventually I think we'd love to have 5 or 10 acres and be on the outskirts of Westfield. I think
you better go to Cicero Sheridan if you want that.
No, well, hopefully Westfield will absorb one of those eventually. But, well, what can be improved on other than real estate? What can be improved on in our community right now? From your point of view, at least.
Yeah, public safety is something I've really been harping on the campaign trail. And public safety consists of 2 things, right? You got the fire department, you got your police department.
Okay.
So let's talk about both. Fire department, when I moved here 19 plus years ago, we were a city of about, let me take that back. We were a town of roughly 9,000 residents.
Town was definitely a better
We were a town. We were not a city. And we had 3 fire stations.
Okay.
And now we are a city of 50,000 people and rapidly growing, and we've got 3 fire stations. And every day, Noblesville and Carmel are making 911 calls into Westfield because we can't keep up.
Huh.
And then, as you know, in that business, seconds matter. If you need them and you're calling 911, you need them and you need them now.
Yeah.
And we're just stretched too thin. And we talked about, keeping up with the infrastructure and lacking a commercial tax base. It all really ties in together. We need, standard-wise right now, we need 2 fire stations. We need to be at 5.
Okay.
But each fire station, when you build it, staff it, and equip it, it's $25 million. And we've got to come up with the money to,
Yeah.
to make that happen. On the police side, I think we've done a lot of good things there. We've kept up for the most part in terms of number of officers. There's two things, though, that I'd like to see change. First off, there is some technology out there, especially around tracking license plates and other things that you can do at light intersections that we have some capability of, but we don't have it integrated throughout the city.
Oh, you're telling me you're going to take pictures of me speeding now? Come on.
Well, I don't know if you heard about the Memorial Jewelry smash and grab.
No.
But this going back a few months ago.
Okay.
They did a smash and grab, stole a lot of jewelry. And we tracked them. We knew where they were going, but when you don't have that technology at every intersection, it's easy to lose them pretty quick.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's one thing. The other thing is too, unfortunately, school shootings is real, and it's something that we're dealing with, and that's not going away anytime soon. At least it doesn't look like it is. We're the only city here in Hamilton County that doesn't have an SRO in every single school building.
Really?
Yeah. And we have one. I think we have two in a high school,
Okay.
one in middle school, one in the intermediate school, and then we have one that floats around to our 6 different elementary schools. But
Okay.
we really need to have an officer in every school.
Yeah.
Some could say it's a bit overkill, but I would argue
I wouldn't say that.
it just takes one incident, and you're going to regret the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's something you can't take a chance on nowadays. So I'd like to see that. Right now we have a partnership with the schools to pay for that head count 50-50. And certainly the schools have a voice. They can say no, they don't want that. But if I'm mayor, I'd be pushing real hard to get those additional officers added so that we can staff to that level.
Yeah. That would definitely be, something that's beneficial. Hopefully it's never something that we experience here in Westfield or Carmel, but
they have in Noblesville, though.
That's right.
They have in Noblesville in our backyard.
Mm-hmm. If you ever need a connection, I know a guy who actually, one of his companies is Kurt. You're welcome for the shout out, by the way. But they have some sort of metal detector that they're putting in stadiums around the country right now, and I think they're looking at putting that into schools too. So something to think about. But of course,
some of
you
these
need money for that,
ones,
right?
Yeah, and some of these recent ones, it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
When you look at the last couple of school shootings, it would not have mattered.
Yeah, because it's not the students that are doing it, right?
It's coming from outside the school.
Gosh.
Yeah, in fact, the one in Noblesville, I think if I remember correctly, the student had stashed a gun outside of a door and had propped it open and reached out and got the gun and without setting off any alarms and came back in. So I'm telling you, there's no one size fits all solution to what we're seeing in society today. But you got to be ready for it. And can one officer stop it? No, but one officer can certainly limit the damage that's done.
Yeah. Yeah, so, especially a well-trained officer.
A well-trained officer.
And I think that's something that Carmel and Westfield does really well. Is they have qualified people. They're not just grabbing for anybody.
We've got some amazing public safety personnel. In fact, in Westfield, it's something we're doing well. With all this rapid growth we've experienced, our crime rates have gone down.
Really?
In Westfield, yes.
That's incredible.
So our law enforcement agents are doing a phenomenal job.
Yeah,
they really are.
They sure are. What are your thoughts on arming teachers in the schools?
Yeah, I struggle with that.
That is a tough one.
It's a tough one because I'm here to tell you, until shots are fired, you don't know how you're going to react.
True.
And it's one thing to teach somebody to point a gun and pull the trigger. It's another thing to keep your heart rate at a level where you can function and not completely panic when people start shooting.
Yeah.
And I've experienced it firsthand, and I'm just here to tell you it takes a lot of training to get there.
I don't doubt it.
Now, I've had people ask me about, what about a retired veteran sitting in a class? Yeah, we might be a little bit closer to a solution there. Yeah. I don't know if that's the right one. I still think
that's actually a great thought, though. A great way to give retired vets jobs.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea.
I've had conversations with residents about that. I still think the best place to put it is within the law enforcement agency of your city.
Right.
Those guys are trained. They're tied in. They know emergency procedures. They work together all the time. I just think that's probably the best place to put it.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on paying? Westfield pays their officers pretty well, from my understanding.
Better than most.
Yeah.
We're not competitive with Carmel and Fishers.
Okay.
We're getting pot shotted from them on occasion. But yeah, we do better than the average city.
Yeah, but like Hamilton County in general pays officers pretty well. What are your thoughts on paying officers better and, putting them through some of the same qualification courses and education courses that we put our military through and our special operations forces through? Because if you think about it, being a police officer is almost in a way a special operations type thing, because you're in the day-to-day of residential, right? But then you're in these urban scenarios that most people aren't trained for.
That's right. Guys, that was a couple of questions. What was the first part you asked?
What do you think? What are your thoughts on paying them more?
Okay, paying them more.
Yeah.
So let's start there, because that is something we've been talking a lot about on the campaign trail. Whether it's a police officer, a firefighter, an urban planner, a human resources generalist, the city has a variety of employees and talents that we have to hire to. It is my vision as mayor that we have the best team in Hamilton County to serve the residents of our community. And salary is certainly an important piece of that. Now, there's a balance. You get good benefits, work environment. There's a lot of things that make a job desirable, but you got to be competitive, especially in law enforcement right now. You talk to any law enforcement agency, they can't get applicants. Really? And the ones they do won't make it through the academy. It's really, really competitive right now. So the worst thing we can do is get an officer, train them, get them to a skill level where they're a valuable resource to our city, and then Carmel takes them from us because they pay literally $20,000 more.
Wow. Well, and nobody gets into service to get rich, right?
They don't.
But you also got to be able to pay your bills.
You got to be real too.
Yeah. If you can go 5 miles down the road and get paid $20,000 more a year, that's a big difference.
That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Now, when you get 20 years of service, you're probably not going to do that. But when they go from an entry level to a level 2 officer, that's where it becomes the gap becomes pretty big pretty fast, and they don't have a lot of skin in the game at that point, where they can't just pull up and go to another city. And let's be honest, they're not living in Kokomo, Indiana. They're living in Westfield, where it's very expensive. Most of our officers don't live in this city. They can't afford it. They want to live here. Well, they can't do that. So,
See, and that to me is just, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Because,
Absolutely.
Because of course we want our police officers in the community.
Oh, my goodness
That's
gracious.
how you get to know them. That's how they get to know you. That's how people don't have these divides of, the cops are bad, right? It's because they're in the community themselves.
Not only that, but when you drive through a neighborhood and you see a squad car sitting in a driveway, you're not likely to.
It's less likely to
you
get
might
robbed.
move on to the next neighborhood. You want them integrated in your community,
right.
And you're right. They, law, and this is where I guess I think your next point you were talking about, advanced training for I wouldn't say combat operations, but similar types of scenarios. Right. Officers also need training on how to diffuse situations. In the military, it's easy.
Tactics, and
that's right. In the military, it goes from 0 to 10. And you kick that door open and it's game on,
boom,
right? In law enforcement nowadays, everybody's got cameras on you.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking to get you in a gotcha moment. And these guys and gals are really walking a fine line. So it's just important that they know how to diffuse a situation, how to keep it from getting to a point where a physical confrontation will happen. Certainly they need to be able to protect themselves if that time comes. But I think the real challenge in law enforcement these days is how you keep it from getting to that point.
Yeah.
Because people are just rude now. You go on Facebook and watch the reels, and people are just goading police officers to try to get them. I can't imagine being in a profession where that's the case. Now, I think here in Westfield, it's not that way.
No.
At least not right now. At least I hope it's not. But certainly that's what law enforcement officers are dealing with.
Yeah, that's hard. I've known friends that have left the force recently. I've had a lot of friends that have been on the department, not here in Westfield, but in other towns around Indiana. A couple at our IMPD, and they've left. They've gotten tired of it.
My brother's one of them.
Really,
he just retired from Indianapolis. He had been on the force 20 years. As soon as he got to retirement age, he was done. And his comment to me was, "Hey, I'm afraid that if the way things are going in law enforcement, I can make a mistake, and not only is my career over, my life's over."
Yeah, a mistake in a hot situation where it sometimes it's you or them.
Yeah,
and why when it's a criminal, why are we standing behind these criminals? Of course, it should be them. And I will say that. It should be them, because the guy defending our communities should not be the one taking a bullet just because he's not allowed to pull the trigger.
Well, when you start overthinking the next steps in situations like that where seconds matter, it's not good.
Well, and these guys have to overthink it,
They
because
have to,
otherwise it's like,
That's
well,
right.
if I do this, now it's too late. Yeah.
Now, obviously, there are some bad apples out there
Sure.
that have really put a lot of police officers on a radar
There
screen
are
that shouldn't be
everywhere.
on. But
Yeah.
there are everywhere. That's right.
Yeah, and I
And
think
you
that's
deal
something
with
we
them.
forget.
And I think society is starting to deal with them better. But I think there's an overcorrection now where I used to ride with my brother when I came back from the Marine Corps duty. So I saw firsthand some of the confrontations that he would have. And man, I'll tell you what, you just don't know until you've been in there how you're going to react to that.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I want to be respectful of your time here. I've got a couple more questions for you, and then we'll get moving on. But how has your faith impacted your life's journey and impacted your mindset for service and wanting to serve your community?
Yeah, so I was raised pretty much by a single mom. My parents divorced when I was 3, and my dad wasn't really involved in my life till I got into high school. And my mom had parents that she was very close to. They were very religious. My mom was raised in a church. She actually played piano and was on the church staff. So from a young age, I was ingrained into our local church. I think it was 7th grade, church camp, I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. And that kind of set my journey for my faith. I got into college, probably lost my way a little bit, as a lot of us
We all do through that age.
And so I was baptized as in 7th grade, but then I got rebaptized when I was in the Marine Corps as a young adult, because I felt like I needed to reconfirm or affirm my faith and wanted to do that publicly. So I got baptized actually twice. I don't think it gets me anything extra in heaven, but I'm hoping maybe it will. But certainly serving in the Marines, serving my community, how I serve my community with a loving heart and just wanting to help people is rooted in my faith. Not to say that you have to serve in the military or to serve your community, but it certainly shaped how I have served my community in the past.
That's awesome. Well, service is a sacrifice, right? And many times you're sacrificing a lot, whether it be time with your family, whether it be your life, whether it be, and I think between what you see in a service role of some sort, as well as, the sacrifices that it takes, the world can get very, very dark unless you have,
That's right,
the Lord and Savior to grab onto. So that's...
And even in politics, as I interact with, with my constituents, my peers, sometimes they're confrontational. Sometimes they can get pretty hateful pretty fast. I've always just tried to take it from a loving heart perspective. I'm not going to get into the mudslinging. I'm not going to retaliate. I'm going to turn the other cheek. Just basic stuff that I think most Christians believe in. I've tried to emulate that in how I behave as a city councilor.
Yeah,
so.
I think a lot of of us believers do believe in that. It's a matter of can we back that up, and do exactly as you're saying, just kind of turn the other cheek and don't throw hands until it's absolutely necessary.
That's right. And I'll never forget. This is going back several years ago. The pastor at my church was talking. I'm sorry about that. Was talking about Christians and how we behave in public. We go to church and we put on this good face of being a good Christian, and then he was sharing that he was talking. I can't remember the exact story, but he was talking to a cashier at the local grocery store, which was actually just down the road from our church.
Okay.
And they were just striking up a conversation and said something about being down the road from the church. And she goes, actually, Sundays after church are the worst times in my job. And he said, well, why would that be? He said, because the people leaving church are some of the most rudest people, treat me with disrespect. They have no patience. And it really caught him off guard. But, look around in society today, people out there saying that, they're Christians or that they're, they live their life in a certain way, and yet they don't treat people necessarily like that. And that's really disappointing.
Yeah. Well, I think that, a lot of people go because it's a task. It's what you're supposed to do, and it just, okay, well, here comes Sunday.
Got that check in the box.
Yeah.
I'll think about it again next Sunday.
Yeah. Well, and what I would tell those people is just don't go.
Yeah.
Don't check a box. Don't do that with your life. Be intentional, you know.
That's right.
And if you're not gonna be into what you're doing, then just don't do it.
That's
you know.
right.
And that's not saying that I don't want people to hear the message and go, but why? If you're not gonna, at least try to live according to what you're practicing, then why do it? You know. Because it gives everybody else a bad name. And
Yeah, it does.
I've run into that countless times. And unfortunately, I went to a Christian school, and it pushed a lot of my friends away from the faith. And especially when you hear of things that happen at a Christian school, I won't name the school right now, but like we had many teen pregnancies in the school I went to, and those people were pushed out of school. They were asked to leave. And to me, that's not doing what Jesus would do. That's not embracing somebody where they're at and meeting them where they're at in life and going, how can we help you? It's going, oh, this is going to hurt our image.
That's right.
That's a whole other conversation for another time. But
You said you want to wrap this up. We're not going in that direction.
We're going towards another hour-long conversation here.
You just went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, but well, Scott, what I asked this to everybody on the podcast, and I think you've already defined this, but just to wrap it up, what is the legacy you want to leave?
I want to leave a legacy that I serve my community. We've talked a lot about service, and I won't dive any deeper into that, but I want people to look back and say that, Scott in every facet of his life gave back to his community. And whether that's as mayor of Westfield is to be determined, but certainly from my service in the military to some of the things I've done here locally through the non-for-profits and other organizations.
That's awesome. Well, Scott, thanks for being on today. Let's do this again.
Appreciate it. No, it's been fun.
Yeah, good luck with the running for mayor. And
3 more weeks.
yeah, that's awesome.
3 more weeks.
Cool. We'll talk to you next time.
Take care.